Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
The amusing sign, Yamanaka Flowers, clashed with the facade of the building housing the shop. However, this didn't stop the store from attracting customers, not only with its inviting coolness, but also with its magical aromas. Roses, dahlias, daisies, and, most importantly, lush hydrangeas, now in full bloom. These charming creatures took up almost half the space, located near the entrance, in the display cases, and even peeking out unabashedly. "There you go!" The little girl surveyed the results of her labors with satisfaction. A new batch of lilac flowers was displayed behind a glass counter. The petals, dripping with fresh water, sparkled playfully, as if teasing all passers-by with their cheerfulness. "Auntie, I'm done!" The little girl waved to the woman standing nearby. They were somewhat alike. Light, almost lemon-colored hair, soft features, and a slightly upturned nose. However, the girl's eyes were a special color, distinct from both her aunt and the other members of the clan. A delicate lilac with barely noticeable veins, they perfectly matched her name. "Hydrangea! Adzasai-chan, you're so good!" The little girl was given a pleasant pat on the head. "You can play outside for a while, but be careful and wear a hat. If you feel unwell, come back right away." "Yes, Andy!" The young Yamanaka obediently pulled on the wide-brimmed headdress that covered the top of her head and almost hid her eyes. As soon as I left my familiar surroundings, I immediately felt uncomfortable. And no, it wasn't because of the weather, but because of the unfamiliar crowd on the street. Fortunately, the day was indeed too sultry for anyone to be overflowing with energy or emotion. The girl walked carefully down the alley adjacent to the family flower shop. She glanced around. A candy store and a discreet vegetable stand. The dango establishment was quite busy, so Adzasai decided not to go there, but to turn off in the middle of the alley. This path led her to another street, a rather quiet and deserted one, with a pleasant green alley at the far end. "Come on!" The boy's voice was heard, indignant and demanding. Adzasai, without raising her eyes, ran towards the sound. The child's cry in such a quiet place interested her. "Get down! Come on!" Now the intonation became higher, and somewhat resembled a plea. Curiosity piqued, Yamanaka risked carefully lifting the brim of her hat and peering at the noisy passerby. The scene before her was intriguing. A dark-haired boy in an all-blue robe sat on a tree branch, a cat lying a couple of branches above. The furry creature meowed pitifully, unable to figure out how to get down. However, any attempt by the man to reach out to him was met with a disgruntled hiss. "Well, come on," the same tone again. "Ha ha," the girl chuckled secretly. This scene clearly amused her. The sound caught the stranger's attention. He glanced at the little Yamanaka, but was in no hurry to engage in conversation. "Come on, come here." He beckoned the kitten to him unsuccessfully. "You just have to go down a little bit lower." It seemed that this time the animal reacted, because it began to move hesitantly towards the boy. Yes, that's it," the rescuer beckoned. "Ha ha." Adzasai laughed again for some reason. The boy gave her a displeased look. Just a little more, the kitten was almost in her arms. Hey! The wayward, fluffy-eared creature made a knight's move. He deftly leaped down, using the man as a fulcrum. The boy clearly wasn't expecting this turn of events, and momentarily lost his balance. That was enough for him to slip off the branch and fall from the tree with a crash. "Ha ha," Adzasai continued to laugh. "Hey, this isn't really funny," the fallen man said indignantly, casually brushing off his pants. "Sorry." Yamanaka didn't deny it, and immediately admitted she was wrong. Normally, she wouldn't have reacted that way, but for some reason, she found this boy so amusing that she couldn't help but laugh. "Forget it, everything's fine." The stranger seemed unable to remain offended for long. "The main thing is that the kitten is saved." Hee hee. Ouch. Adzusai covered her mouth with her hands, as she involuntarily lost her temper again. It's not funny. The boy screamed even louder than when he'd fallen to the ground. I promised Grandma I'd be home any minute. What should I do? What should I do? The troublemaker began pacing, clutching his neck nervously. He was obviously trying to come up with a plan that didn't exist. Right. It seemed to dawn on him. Flowers. If I bring something beautiful, Grandma won't scold me. What a wonderful idea. You? Why, yes. What is your name? Ajisai. Yamanaka Ajisai. The girl was taken aback by such pressure. She was bad at communicating with people, and when it began so suddenly, she was even more confused. I am Uchiha Obito. The boy extended his hand. The future Hokage of Konoha. I see. The girl timidly shook the outstretched hand. But that's not the point now. That flower on your hat. Why, yes. Where is he from? The new acquaintance was very persistent, coming too close in joyful anticipation. And my family owns a flower shop. Bingo! Can you show me where it is, please? From this distance, one could even make out a thin pink scratch on his cheek. Obviously the result of a recent adventure. The girl didn't object. She simply looked down again and, frowning, walked toward Yamanaka's shop. Obito followed her. Thank you. The boy was genuinely delighted with his successful purchase. With hydrangeas in bloom, they were the most affordable option, so Obito left the shop with a sprig of this luxurious plant. See you later, little hydrangea. Bye. Uchiha left the threshold before Ajisai could answer him, so her shy words of farewell seemed to vanish into thin air. She didn't know if this boy would remember her, but little Obito had been imprinted in Ajisai's memory even then. He exuded light and sincerity. His soul harbored no demons of malice or envy, and even when the kitten deceived him, he didn't get angry. Little Yamanaka, who had feared the outside world because of her peculiarity, was able for the first time to find a small thread leading to a greater life. Commentary on Scroll 1, Hydrangea. About the heroine's name. Ajisai is the Japanese word for hydrangea, so Obito's first encounter with the heroine is inspired by this flower. This moment will recur several times later in the story. If you break down the Japanese word itself into its individual characters, you'll get purple, sun, one of the possible variants, and flower. Therefore, the story's title, Flowers of the Purple Sun, is essentially the same as hydrangea. In other words, the title is a coded reference to the heroine's name. Kakashi, well done! 10 out of 10 hits! The examiner looked over all the hit targets and cheerfully praised the student. The silver-haired boy, his face hidden behind a mask, merely bowed discreetly and disappeared among the other test subjects. Wow, cool! A girl from the crowd admired. Kakashi is so cool! The boy spoke up. He looked at the white Fong sun with undisguised admiration. As expected of him, came another shout of praise. Okay, next up we have. The teacher still didn't want the young talent to get too cocky, so he decided to immediately call on the next student. Yamanaka Ajisai. Why, yes. The girl winced when she heard her name, then hesitantly moved toward the center of the court. She tensely fiddled with the hem of her dress, while the experienced shinobi pulled out metal stars from somewhere. All the while, the whispers of her classmates irritated her ears. Never seen her. Who is she? It's the Yamanakas, the ones who rummaged through my brain. Yeah, I heard she's homeschooled. That's why she only showed up now. Homeschooled? Why does she have such a privilege? Came from all directions. The other people's words weighed heavily, causing the hem of her dress to be irrevocably wrinkled. But there was something else that was even more destructive to her psyche. A shivering fear, a chilling excitement, a devouring anger, a sticky, viscous envy, a body-crushing fatigue. Ajisai, like litmus paper, absorbed every emotion gathered. Coming from a clan of censor ninja, the girl was predisposed to mind control techniques. However, in her case, there was another peculiarity. With her sensitive gut, she sensed the slightest changes in the emotions of those around her. It was more akin to a curse than a gift. The girl found it difficult to be around strangers, and even more so in large groups. Each time, she absorbed everyone else's experiences, causing her own emotional devastation. So it was now. Little Yamanaka's knees were shaking with terror, her chest was tearing with anger, she was drawn to the ground by terrible exhaustion, and she was sickened by envy. She felt ill, unbearably ill, but no one could help, only she could control her illness, otherwise she would remain an unsociable flower for the rest of her life. Ajisai? The teacher was aware of the girl's illness, but pitying anyone was not part of the stern warrior's code. Yamanaka clutched her shuriken tightly, but she couldn't drop them. She was feverish and unsteady. Sorry I'm late. A noise came from behind her, but Adzisai didn't react to the sound. Abito, you're late again, the examiner said indignantly, obviously already well acquainted with the boy's bad habit. Sorry, I just saw Grandma. Enough excuses. Go to class, the man said, gesturing eloquently toward the crowd of students. The dejected Uchiha wanted to object, but he knew he was wrong, so he said nothing. Abito? The surprised voice clearly belonged to a girl, but the latecomer couldn't identify it. Why you remember me? The boy didn't realize how much courage such a simple question required. The purple lights flickered in confusion across from him. It was clear the little ninja was nervous, but no one could have guessed that at that moment Yamanaka was clinging to her last chance not to faint. You? There was a pause. Abito was obviously thinking hard about something, and then he cried out. Oh, right! Hydrangea girl! I remember your eyes. My name is Ajisai, Yamanaka protested, unusually for herself. Yes, exactly, Ajisai. Uchiha visibly brightened at the sudden encounter. The girl, shaking with emotion, looked more like a lily of the valley in the wind than a proud hydrangea. Okay, we're done. A few audible claps from the examiner. Adzisai, get started. How could this be? The Uchiha complained, practically tearing his hair out in frustration. Not a single. You understand, not a single hit. And he almost killed the examiner. Abito had been grumbling and complaining about his failed test for half an hour now. The boy didn't hide his emotions, a rarity even among children in those difficult times. His feelings, regret, anger, resentment, splashed out like water in a fountain. But this flow became a welcome relief for the Yamanaka child, something that always burned away in the scorching heat of others' experiences. The girl sat nearby, but couldn't find anything to say. Communication was her weakest point. And Kakashi. At this remark, Uchiha abruptly broke off, lost in his thoughts. His fists clenched, and his gaze dimmed. Don't compare yourself to him. Yamanaka tried to console him awkwardly when she felt envy and darkness rising in the boy's heart. Adzisai, I'm here. Let's go home. A tall woman with pale skin and the same light hair as the little ninja appeared before the boys. The resemblance hinted at a family connection. Yes, Mommy. The girl obediently rose from the bench where the two had been sitting all this time, approached her parent, and moved away from the Uchiha. However, she felt uneasy, a feeling of something wrong gnawing at her from within. Before they could properly move away, Ajisai rushed back to the boy. Boo, the future Hokage shouldn't look around. Only forward, the little girl blurted out, practically without a single hesitation. The courage she garnered vanished with the last word. Her face flushed crimson, and her lips trembled. Not wanting to prolong what she considered a moment of shame, Ajisai rushed back to her mother. Embarrassed by her own actions, she didn't have time to notice how flushed the young shinobi's cheeks had become. Oh, Abito, Don't be stubborn, go ahead. The young man stretched out tiredly on a chair next to the flower stall. It was almost night outside, making the pleasant yellowish light of the room contrast sharply with the darkness outside. And no need. I'd be unnecessary there. Yamanaka's sternness mingled with uncertainty. She lowered her gaze and continued trimming another plant with variegated petals. What nonsense! Come on! They're great. No, of course, Kakashi is a real piece of work, but he's still okay. This is your team. I don't think they'll be happy to see a stranger. Adzusai, with enviable stubbornness, refused what the young man considered such a tempting offer. What stranger? You studied at the academy for so long. And after that incident, they definitely know you. The girl's conspiratorial chuckle didn't escape her notice. Obito. That exam fight was good, yeah. Defeating Kurenai's illusion jutsu with a telepathic technique. I couldn't have done it if... Adzusai blushed, feeling the admiration and pride radiating from the Uchiha. He genuinely admired his friend. However, Yamanaka, who suffered from constant imposter syndrome, still believed that she had only won thanks to the boy's support. Although, of course, there was certainly some truth to that statement. It doesn't matter now, if we're not, Obito mimicked. The main thing is that I won. Probably yes. In fact, Adzusai was also very proud of that fight. But not so much for its outward result, but for the great inner achievement. The girl was no longer afraid to use mind-controlled jutsu. Previously, she had been paralyzed by an overwhelming fear the moment she began performing hand seals. But after that battle, something changed. So don't deny it. Let's go to Rin's birthday. You can't just hang out with me like that. You need to make new friends. If it were up to Adzusai, she would have remained confined to her family and the young Uchiha. Of course, after endless attempts and years of spiritual training, the girl adapted to social interaction. She still read people's hidden feelings, but now she'd learned to live with it, trying to suppress all incoming signals. However, Yamanaka also hid her own feelings deep within, and so she seemed too quiet and withdrawn to almost everyone. Okay, I agree. She finally gave in. A birthday in this case didn't call for a riotous celebration. The shinobi had too many other things to worry about. However, Nora suggested the team gather at a local diner and simply have a pleasant dinner. Ren, we're here! Obito immediately attracted the attention of the onlookers sitting in the noodle shop, sipping hot ramen. It was hardly surprising, as the young man burst into the establishment with a bang, nearly knocking over a huge bouquet of cornflowers as he went. You're late as always! The shinobi with silver hair sticking up on top of his head scolded him. And you're dissatisfied with everything, as usual. Obito made a childish face, then turned to the girl and presented her with a rich blue bouquet. Thank you, Obito. Watching this almost friendly squabble, Adzusai felt uneasy. She hadn't been entirely supportive of the idea of a barely familiar ninja showing up at the party, and now she immediately felt out of place. She wanted to finish the party and return to her native flower shop, where she would once again sort through the beautiful roses and peonies and arrange bouquets of cornflowers. Of course, the birthday girl's bouquet had been purchased at the Yamanaka shop. Adzusai kept a wary eye on the fragrant bunch the entire way. Obito, as if on purpose, had chosen the most controversial flower. I dare not express my feelings. That was what it meant. On the one hand, cornflowers could be given as a sign of friendship. The author is not a florist, so my knowledge on this topic is limited to information from the internet. If there are any inaccuracies in the interpretation of the flower's meanings, we will chalk them up to fiction, smiley face. But on the other, these thoughts haunted them even after the boys had already sat down in the diner and placed their orders. Kakashi, you're not even going to take off your mask now? The young Uchiha protested, glaring at his interlocutor. I'm full, so I won't eat, was the cold, impartial answer. Then why did you come here? Obito clearly wasn't very patient. Because Minato-sensei said it was part of the mission. Why you, little one? You and I are the same height, but I have a higher status. At that time, Kakashi was already at Jounin. Uchiha grumbled something, but Hatake remained unperturbed. Adzusai, sitting silently across from him and watching the proceedings with a slightly sullen expression, finally looked into Kakashi's dark eyes. The girl shuddered. Yamanaka unconsciously pressed herself against Uchiha, grabbing the sleeve of his blue jacket. "Adzusai, are you okay?" She didn't answer, but her thin hand trembled slightly. "Okay, guys, that's enough," Ring commanded in a stern, almost parental tone. "I'm sorry this happened, Adzusai." The shinobi turned to the confused Yamanaka, taking her hand in hers in a friendly manner. Noera smiled softly. She was genuinely worried about embarrassing her guests with her teammates' unpleasant squabble and genuinely wanted them to find common ground. Ajisai immediately registered these emotions. Her heart felt warmer and calmer, as if the kind girl had enveloped her in her light. The rest of the gathering continued without incident. Ajisai, Abito said to his friend. The village had already fallen asleep, and only the neighborhoods of restaurants and other such establishments were brightly lit. The caring Uchiha couldn't allow the girl to walk home alone so late, even if she was already a skilled shinobi. So, the two slowly strolled down yet another street, illuminated by the stars. "What's happened?" "Today at the noodle shop. You seemed scared of something and rushed towards me." "What was that?" "It's..." The girl understood that Uchiha would definitely ask her about what happened, but she still didn't know how best to explain it. "He's empty." "He? Who are you talking about?" Abito, who didn't have any heightened sensory abilities, naturally couldn't immediately grasp his friend's idea. "Hatake Kakashi. I rarely interacted with him, and this was the first time I'd seen him up close. But..." A brief pause added tension to the situation. Emotions. Usually people either show them as they are, or hide them deep inside. But Kakashi. What's wrong with him? He has superficial irritation, bewilderment, or annoyance. But inside, he's empty. He has no feelings that come from the heart. There's nothing there, only emptiness. Ajisai didn't notice how she stopped and covered her face, remembering what she'd experienced. She'd never seen anything like it. Even the village's most brutal warriors bore a trace of humanity, but Hatake had become so imbued with the idea of ninja weapons that he had rejected any sign of weakness. "I'm sorry, I didn't think this would happen." Abito wasn't to blame, because no one could have predicted such an incident. Guilt and regret gradually grew. "In nothing, I had fun." Adzusai tried to brighten the situation as best she could. She didn't want her friend to be tormented because of her. "Let's go." The girl, still looking little like a stately hydrangea, and the young man, like a flame flickering in the wind, continued on their way. Tomorrow, he would come to the flower shop again and talk at length. She would listen politely, arranging bouquets and arranging flowers on the counter. And they would be happy in their own way, even in these turbulent times. Scroll 4. Spark Commentary on Scroll 4. Spark. This work is created for entertainment purposes only. All rights to the locations, world, and characters of Naruto belong to the original copyright holder. The team made their way through a forest unfamiliar to the inhabitants of Konohagakure. Instead of towering green branches, the massive treetops sprouted mushrooms, or at least something resembling them. The decision to destroy the canopy bridge was made hastily, and the village had little choice in the matter, so 3 Chunin and 2 Jounin of varying experience were dispatched. And the first test on the way to the bridge, that very forest. "There's someone here." The leader of the unconventional squad slowed his pace. Hatake Kakashi could be considered a worthy successor to the White Fang, as he could detect someone else's presence by just a rustling sound and a faint scent. "Is he alone?" asked his older partner. More accurately, his mentor and recent teacher, Konoha's Yellow Lightning, Namike's Minato. "Yes. Be careful, there are many more enemies." The warning was addressed not only to the young Hatake, but also to his 3 comrades. "I don't sense anything from them. They're clones. Adzusai was absolutely certain of her words, as the copies couldn't emit any emotion. The Censornine had been included as an additional participant precisely because of his ability to sense the enemy's presence. It was well known that the enemy could conceal itself, completely blending into its surroundings. I'll finish here quickly. Kakashi formed a strange combination of seals, and a ball of lightning sparked in his hand. The light was blinding, and the cracking sound was astonishing in its power. "You shouldn't," Minato said, trying to stop the still immature Jounin from recklessly using the new technique. Namikaze exuded tension, anxiety, and confidence. It was as if the shinobi knew something was bound to go wrong. "Sensei, you said yourself that I'm captain today. According to the regulations, the team must obey the captain's orders, right?" The elder said nothing more, allowing the rookie commander to decide for himself. Despite his young age, Kakashi was considered sufficiently qualified to attain the highest rank among ninja, meaning there was no objective reason to doubt his abilities. However, he was still too reckless in his decisions and, worst of all, completely immature as a person. This refers to his constant desire to act strictly by the rules, which stems from a simple lack of life experience. A mature person is not only balanced in their actions, but also possesses a certain level of empathy, which Kakashi lacks. For Adzusai, a blank man in the leadership position was a living nightmare. She couldn't even imagine what a shinobi who acted strictly by the book and never deviated from the manual was capable of in a critical situation. She understood. If forced to choose between the success of the mission and anything else, Hataki would choose the former without hesitation. It all happened so fast. Too fast. A few seconds later, the wounded Kakashi was already in Ren's clutches. He was wounded faster than the three of them could blink. A moment later, a scream came from somewhere off to the side, the exact moment Namikaze disappeared. The secret jutsu allowed yellow lightning to move faster than anyone could imagine. "Kakashi's wounds are quite serious," Minato said, returning with a slight rustle, as if he hadn't left to deal with the enemy. "We'd better retreat and set up camp for now." "I'm fine," the young warrior protested. But was his displeasure as deep as it seemed at first glance? The empathetic Adzusai would still have answered in the negative. "What are you talking about? You ignored your teacher and went into battle AWOL." Obito was angry, definitely angry. "I have nothing to say to a coward from the elite Uchiha who isn't even ready for a real fight. All you can do is cry like a little girl." "I wasn't crying. I just got something in my eye." The tension was mounting, and a sickening lump was already rising in her throat. Yamanaka found it extremely difficult to be present during any argument, and doubly so during conflicts arising in such a dangerous environment. She could physically feel the air heating up, the constriction in her lungs from trying to contain her frustration, the fire blazing inside her from her simmering anger. "Stop it!" The unusually cold voice of teacher Minato sobered the boys. "Obito, you were wearing protective goggles, so nothing could have gotten into your eye. If you keep throwing around excuses so easily, your spirit will weaken too." The Uchiha had no retort to the truth. Shame washed over him like a wave, and regret welled up from somewhere below, its tenacious claws crawling straight to his heart. "Oh, Obito!" Adzusai carefully took her friend's hand, hoping to support him. It seemed she'd completely forgotten one important detail in her excitement and had recklessly stepped into the fire. The moment their fingers timidly touched, she nearly collapsed. The boy's emotions pierced her with renewed force, pressing on her temples and sending shivers down her spine. "Adzusai," the young Uchiha noticed the trembling. "You? I forgive." The girl told him that any physical contact greatly enhances the ability. Therefore, even despite Obito's extroversion, his negative, and therefore most destructive, feelings immediately transferred to her. He never wanted to hurt her, much less harm her with his own selfishness. Confused, the young man recoiled and took a few steps back, looking regretfully at his friend's pale face. Unfortunately, the best he could do in such a situation was to stay away. For a moment, The seditious thought even crept into his mind. Abandon everything and return to the village, to the Yamanaka flower shop, no matter how ridiculous he'd be. But overcoming a moment of weakness, Obito remained standing. "And you too, Kakashi," Minato continued, interrupted. "The success of a mission directly depends on the combat readiness of the ninja involved. You know the sensors are very sensitive, and Agisai is super sensitive. You couldn't have been kept informed of this." "Yes. Your altercation knocked out the only person capable of spotting the enemy," Minato said, casting a meaningful glance at the girl who was trying to regain her composure. "And don't forget that rules aren't everything." The elder finally softened. "There are situations when you have to adapt to the situation. Before we get separated, let me remind you once again, the most important thing for a shinobi is teamwork." The mature teacher not only mastered the techniques necessary for battle, but was also skilled in expressing thoughts. So it was now, just a few remarks managed to touch the most delicate chords of the soul. For some reason, Agisai even seemed to discern a faint spark igniting within the hollow shinobi. Scroll 5. Salvation Commentary on Scroll 5, Salvation. This work is created for entertainment purposes only. All rights to the locations, world, and characters of Naruto belong to the original copyright holder. The next day, the squad split up. Minato and Namikaze took a different route to assist the younger members and create a distraction, while the boys themselves remained on their previous route. Despite the previous day's argument, there was no longer any discord within the team. For some reason, Obito even called Kakashi Captain that morning, the first time since the mission began. Something must have happened while most of the group was asleep, but what exactly was left to speculate. Having passed most of the bamboo grove, the shinobi found themselves near a secluded lake. In my version, they didn't manage to enter the lake itself, but remained on the shore. Just another waypoint, nothing more. However, Agisai tensed, sensing unfamiliar currents. "Ambush!" she said so quietly that only Kakashi could hear. The fight began suddenly, but thanks to the ninja sensor, it didn't take them by surprise. An unknown shinobi leaped out from cover, weapon raised for a strike. Hatake parried it with his blade. Uchiha was already preparing to summon a fireball, while the girls armed themselves with kunai. 4-against-1, an unfair fight, if not for the enemy's reinforcements. "Rin, behind you!" Agisai shouted at the top of her lungs when she sensed a menacing aura behind her. Another enemy appeared out of nowhere. Noera didn't have time to dodge, and was about to fall into the brute's clutches. "Consciousness transfer technique!" Yamanaka caught the gaze of the man who had materialized out of thin air and transferred her mind into his body. The remaining empty shell fell limply onto the grass. Stench. Perhaps that was the word that best described what was going on in this man's head. Cruelty and violence. Bloodlust. Obscene jokes with friends. It seemed there was nothing pure in his soul. Although no. Here are memories of childhood, cloudless and unspoiled by war. Parents. A home to return to. Or not. Just move away, and that home and loving family are gone. All around is only a corrosive hatred dulled by everyday life. Agisai nearly drowned in alien memories and feelings, but somehow she pulled herself together and managed to recognize her mind within the alien body, large, heavy, and unusually clumsy. She released Rin, whom the brute had already managed to knock out. Obito, running up, scooped the unconscious Noera into his arms. His partner was saved, so it was time to return to her identity as Yamanaka Agisai, because maintaining control over such a terrifying opponent proved too difficult for long. Agisai closed her eyes one last time as the IWA Shinobi, confident that in a moment she would open them as the Leaf Ninja. That second proved fatal. The girl felt someone holding her. Someone too tall and strong to be Obito or Kakashi. Master Minato couldn't be here. Before Ajisai could even realize she was being grabbed and fight back, the light of her young spirit faded. Everything was mixed up. Some people reveal the truth? About what? She won't betray her village. Dark Pitch. Scarlet Flame. Blue Night. What is this? Where is she? Who is she? The girl wandered through the nooks and crannies of her consciousness, gradually losing herself. A boy with gray hair. Is he a friend or an enemy? It's so sickening, it feels like it's tearing me apart. A girl with purple stripes on her cheeks. She exudes comfort and care. I can't wake up. Blonde hair mom? I want to go home. Coal eyes and equally black hair. Someone I know, I can't remember. He laughs. And now he's crying. No, he's laughing again. It seems like this is someone important to me. Adzasai! An unknown voice was heard. Why hydrangea? It's a flower. Abito? Yamanaka struggled to come to her senses. Her ears were ringing, but her awareness of reality was slowly returning. The room was almost completely dark. It was either a shaft or a cave. There was no musty smell, so they were probably not underground. Had someone come for her? Her worried friend seemed ready to burst into tears right there on the spot. Kakashi, sitting to her left, was less expressive, but he exuded anxiety. Rin's state was somewhere in between. Don't move, I'll free you. Only now did Ajisai realize she'd been bound by a rope this whole time. Her partner was skillfully yanking her captive free, and her thoughts were consumed by only one question. Why is Kakashi here? A man who denied feelings, who considered emotions useless, would risk sacrificing the success of the mission? Everything will be fine now, Abito tried to assure him. Determination burned within him, like a flame flickering in the wind that had finally found peace. Indeed, they are tense guys. A lanky man appeared from somewhere behind, the one the shinobi had neutralized at the entrance. They should have neutralized him. But something went wrong, and the enemy looked perfectly sane, albeit battered. Well, it's okay now. A flood of aggression, mixed with triumphant exultation, overwhelmed Adzasai. The girl glanced directly at her enemy, and in a second, her consciousness had already replaced him. The more experienced opponent had knocked the weakened sensor from his mind almost immediately. But it was enough for her to grasp his intention. Run! The girl screamed at the top of her lungs, running toward the exit and pulling the others along with her. A second later, the cave's ceiling began to rapidly collapse. Boulders fell in all directions, trying to bury everyone beneath them. But they made it. They jumped out right behind the stone shinobi, shrouded in a cloud of dust and rubble. Damn! Another trap, one that shouldn't have been there before, was already waiting here. The explosion happened too quickly. Adzasai had no time to react. The only thing she could do was quickly brace herself, somehow protecting herself from the destructive torrent. The roar, the screams, it was as if a storm had engulfed her. It seemed as if her entire life had been compressed into that brief flash. Shinobi? I deliberately avoid using the word kunoichi and refer to both male and female ninja as shinobi. Tried to rise, but nothing worked. Her head was spinning too much, the sound was deafening, and something heavy was pressing her to the ground. Dudum! She heard the beat of someone's heart. Her eyelids fluttered open of their own accord. Oh! Abito? Abito? The girl threw her friend to the ground and began shaking him convulsively by the shoulders, while icy fear squeezed her throat. The young man was covered in sand, battered and wounded in the head. His clothes were stained with blood in places, as were his favorite protective goggles. No, come to your senses! Open your eyes! Abito! Abito! Uchiha continued to lie motionless. Scroll 6. Don't lose Commentary on Scroll 6. Not losing. This work is created for entertainment purposes only. All rights to the locations, world, and characters of Naruto belong to the original copyright holder. My favorite flower? Let me think. The mischievous young man playfully rocked back and forth in his chair, trying to come up with an answer. Hydrangea. But why hydrangea? You always get irises. The girl blushed and glanced sideways at the graceful buds in the corner. I think I'm not good enough for hydrangeas yet. The main character's name, Ajisai, means hydrangea. Therefore, in Japanese, the phrase would be ambiguous and could be understood as, I'm not good enough for you yet, Ajisai. No, Obito, you're already good enough, the girl said with longing and anxiety, once again bringing a bouquet of those very same hydrangeas to the patient's bedside. It had been 5 days since Uchiha's unconsciousness. The mission had been a success. Master Minato appeared just as Kakashi threw the kunai he'd given him at the enemy. The yellow lightning had saved his charges, and they all returned to the village. However, the shell-shocked Obito never regained consciousness, even after medical techniques were used on him. Long eyelashes, spiky hair, a round face. Many clan members thought Obito lacked aristocratic appearance, that he was always too much trouble, and that his behavior sometimes resembled that of a girl. But to her, none of this mattered. He didn't need to live up to some made-up standard to be loved. Yes, Yamanaka truly loved this noisy shinobi who visited the family store every other day. However, she realized her feelings too late. Ironically, the hyper-empathic censor ninja read others' experiences like an open book, while her own were like arcane writing. The girl didn't know whether the young man loved her back, but she always felt important to him. Please open your eyes, Obito. Ajisai wiped away a tear that had rolled down her face, and, not wanting to cry right there in the room, walked away. It was a warm summer day. The sun shone with all its might, and a soft breeze played with the weightless hospital curtains. Outside, the noise was loud. There was a kindergarten nearby, and at this time, the children were supposed to be out for a walk. The laughter outside contrasted sharply with the melancholy atmosphere in the ward. The door creaked open, and a pale girl walked in. Her light lemon hair, escaping from her coiffure, seemed almost too vibrant against her grayish skin and faded lilac irises. Ajisai, are you here yet? Asked another guest, who had been sitting motionless by the unconscious patient's bedside the entire time. Yes, Ren, thank you. You're probably tired, so go get some rest for now. Yes, thank you. The visitor bowed politely and left the room. That day, Yamanaka had genuinely wanted to save her partner, so she never tried to blame her, but for some reason, Noira felt uncomfortable looking the girl in the eye. Ajisai began her usual routine, which had already become a daily one, placing a new bouquet of flowers on the bedside table, removing the old one, and changing the water in the vase. When she returned from the hallway, having thrown out the wilted flowers, she saw something that seemed unbelievable. The young man, who had shown only weak signs of life for over a week, now desperately tried to move his arm. Unaccustomed to his own body, he could only manage to throw it off the bed. Now his palm and forearm hung limply in the air. Obito! Ajisai wanted to rush to the injured man, but, restraining a momentary impulse, she darted after the nurses. Then, too much happened. Medical personnel began swarming around the patient, trying to assess his condition. It didn't take more than a couple of minutes for the doctors to arrive and begin treating the Uchiha in earnest. All Ajisai could do was wait for all the necessary procedures to be completed. Knock, knock. Yamanaka knocked, not wanting to disturb her friend, who had just woken up, with a sudden visit. It was evening, so the bluish-white lamps were already lit in the rooms. Come in, said a weak, yet familiar voice. Obito sat on the bed, looking a little absent-mindedly at the dusk falling over the village. How are you feeling? Ajisai sat down opposite him and touched the young man's forearm with a worried expression. For some reason, she thought he tried to pull away, but she quickly pushed the doubtful thoughts away. Good. The doctor said the test results will come in the next few days, and if everything is fine, I'll be discharged. I see. A sigh of relief. I'm glad. Really? I'm very glad. Something painfully hot poured down her cheeks. The torment that had been gnawing at her from within began to gradually evaporate, bringing with it scalding drops of tears. Adzasai frantically tried to get rid of the unwanted dampness, but ended up merely smearing the moisture. I'm sorry. I just... Her broken sentences were interspersed with loud sobs. When you covered me, I thought you'd never wake up again. Obito, don't cry. Uchiha felt awkward about what was happening and awkwardly stroked the girl's head. They spent some time like that. Ajisai was the first to break the silence. Sorry, I got carried away, she said, taking a napkin out of her pocket and starting to tidy herself up. Yamanaka really did look bad right now. And nothing, everything's fine. The young man smiled tensely, but his emotions remained somewhat clouded. He remained silent for a moment, uncertain, but finally risked voicing what was troubling him so much. Sorry, but who are you? Adzasai screamed. It was so drawn out and pitiful, as if she'd just lost something precious. She began frantically pulling at her hair, which had withered over the days, falling to her knees and convulsing hysterically. Only the nurses, who had rushed to the sound, were able to calm the suddenly wild girl. Commentary on Scroll 6. Not losing. The hydrangea bouquet at a patient's bedside is purely a fantasy. Do not repeat. The internet says that flowers like hydrangeas, mimosas, and primroses actively absorb oxygen, so they are not recommended. For example, for pregnant women, so placing them at a patient's bedside is also not recommended. Scroll 7. Memories Commentary on Scroll 7. Memories. This work is created for entertainment purposes only. All rights to the locations, world, and characters of Naruto belong to the original copyright holder. Emptiness. Futility. Vacuum. Nothingness. After that day, Ajisai began to feel like a bottomless black hole, sucking in the emotions of everyone around her. Every slightest manifestation of fleeting joy and deep sorrow, unbridled mirth and stinging resentment, she absorbed it all like a sponge. Like a traveler lost in the mountains, desperately trying to find a way out. But there was no way out. Uchiha Obito had lost all memory of Yamanaka Ajisai. The most painful thing was that his friend had forgotten only her dash. He remembered the basics of taijutsu perfectly, could summon a fireball, recognized his partners and mentor, his grandmother, and could name all his classmates from the academy. But it was as if the hydrangea girl had never existed. Obito only smiled awkwardly at the sight of the Yamanaka flowers, clearly not understanding why the doctors had brought him so far away. When he saw Ajisai visiting him in the hospital, he couldn't find the right words to start a conversation, and she sensed his embarrassment. The doctors could do nothing. Even his uncle, having penetrated the Uchiha's mind, merely shrugged. The events concerning Ajisai were locked away in the very depths of his mind, still not completely erased, but no longer accessible to the shinobi himself. These things happen, especially after a concussion. The medics echoed the censorine. All she could do was wait. Try to somehow recapture the lost fragments of memory. Visit Obito while he was recovering, bring him things that reminded him of their shared past. And Ajisai tried honestly at first. She came to him in every free moment, gave him fragrant bouquets, and told him stories of childhood silly things. But there was nothing in response. The young man remained just as indifferent, though he tried to feign some kind of success. However, Ajisai sensed the futility of his efforts. Her friend's detached emotions never wavered. Soon the girl gave in. She stopped coming to the clinic, but every other day she sent fresh flowers, each time a different one. First, the cornflowers Obito had given Rin for her birthday, then the irises he often bought for his grandmother, and hydrangeas, purple, pink, white, greenish. "Please remember me, Obito," the girl prayed each time, handing the fragrant bundle to the nurses so they could deliver it to the patient. And each time, at her hopeful gaze, the medical staff merely shook their heads. Then Ajisai slowly began to close herself off from the world, becoming a mere bystander to her own life. The utter emptiness within her intensified her cursed ability beyond belief. She began to absorb the experiences of others with renewed vigor, as if seeking to fill the gaping hole in her heart. It was a typical weekday. The ninjas were eager to leave for missions, while the carefree children, unburdened by the problems of adulthood, frolicked on the kindergarten playground. Their joyful cries echoed in the empty Yamanaka like a soft, pleasant shadow. The girl had been temporarily suspended from missions due to her fragile emotional state, which could have been fatal for an empath like her. So now Ajisai could afford to stroll leisurely through the streets of Konoha without keeping track of time. However, on this day, she carried a lush bouquet of flowers and a small bag of sweets. Today, Obito was being discharged and sent home on bed rest. "Oh, thank you so much, Rin." Uchiha was clearly pleased with the doctor's decision. He stood at the hospital exit, enthusiastically accepting congratulations from his teammates. "Kakashi, did you even think of giving me something?" Obito mockingly taunted his comrade. Hatake seemed indifferent, but Ajisai immediately sensed that something had changed in him after that mission. The previously empty youth now radiated pale emotions. Yes, still a little dulled and more like faint ripples on water, but real and sincere. "What do you mean? You didn't give me anything to celebrate my becoming a jounin," the shinobi said, his shoulders widening in displeasure. "I'm here because the teacher asked me to." A painfully familiar situation. Hint, Chapter 3. Empty. But this time, Hatake was lying shamelessly. He wanted to come and support the comrade he'd nearly lost. However, only Yamanaka could read this little lie. Ironically, now she's the one who's empty. "Ajisai, you've arrived." Noera Rin greeted her. Yamanaka had been standing off to the side the entire time, so they didn't notice her right away. Hello, Rin, Kakashi." "Obito." The girl didn't even look up, staring at the miserable bouquet of hydrangeas that she was nervously clutching. "Hello, Ajisai," Obito replied. He tried to look as casual as possible, but nothing could escape the sensitive girl. His friend still didn't remember her. "Congratulations on your discharge." Yamanaka handed over the prepared gifts, concentrating on the sounds of children happily playing nearby. Those playful voices allowed her to squeeze out a faint grimace of emotion. "Thank you." This forced smile did not suit the Uchiha at all, but he was simply not capable of any other. "We were thinking of walking Obito home," Rin said, trying to lighten the mood a little. "Ajisai, would you like to come with us?" As always, Noera exuded a warmth that was almost maternally comforting. Sorry, I still need to help my auntie at the store." "I see." "Yes, I apologize." Ajisai bowed and added before leaving, "Once again, congratulations on your discharge." She turned and walked away with a jerky gait. "Thank you." "Take care." Uchiha's voice came from behind her. Ajisai quickened her pace. Commentary on Scroll 7, Memories. I've seen references to memory loss for a specific person in other works of fiction, but I'm not a doctor and don't know if this actually happens. What's described here is, in any case, fiction and the author's imagination. P.S. I hope you haven't gotten sick yet from the number of hydrangeas per square meter, smiley face. Scroll 8. Apogee Commentary on Scroll 8, Apogee. This work is created for entertainment purposes only. All rights to the locations, world, and characters of Naruto belong to the original copyright holder. This chapter contains vivid descriptions of mental anguish. If for any reason you find this uncomfortable, it's best to skip this section. The news of Noera Rin's death was a devastating blow. In these troubled times, such events, unfortunately, were not a surprise, but each loss was a painful wound for Konoha. A gifted medic, a promising shinobi, and, ultimately, a young girl whose life was cut short too soon. Ajisai didn't attend the funeral. If the sensitive censor had attended, given her current emotional state, she could easily have been laid to rest next to her after some time. The girl felt ashamed that she hadn't been able to see the bright Noira off on her final journey, so after some time, she finally decided to visit the cemetery. An ordinary day, no different from the previous ones. The temperature outside promised autumn was approaching, but the air was still warm enough for late summer. A girl with empty lilac eyes slowly wandered among the gravestones. In her hands, she carried a bouquet of fresh lilies, from which a sweet, haunting trail trailed. The visitor stopped in front of one of the monuments and laid the flowers. "I'm sorry we couldn't protect you, Rin." The girl clasped her hands, as if she were truly speaking to the dead woman. Yamanaka bowed deeply and stood there for a moment in complete silence. The wind gently swayed two lifeless strands of blonde hair falling from her large buns. As she left the cemetery, Adzusai sensed a thick cloud of negative emotions. It wasn't surprising in such a place, but the flow of feelings was mingled with a distinct scent of malice. She was about to pass on when she heard all too familiar voices. "Kakashi, you bastard! This is all your fault!" Obito, completely out of control at the moment, screamed furiously at his teammate. Blind rage and utter despair seeped from his guts. Hatake remained silent. Grief, regret, and a quiet self-hatred radiated from him. "How could you?" Uchiha continued. Ajisai approached unconsciously, but her silhouette was hidden by the trees, so the quarreling pair wouldn't have been able to spot the bystander to their conversation. Although, the observant Kakashi had likely already heard her approach. "Forgive me!" Hopelessness and the bitterness of loss mingled, creating a dense aura. Adzusai found it hard to breathe, as if the air around her was slowly being deprived of oxygen, filling with oppressive emotions. However, she didn't move. "Is that all you have to say?" Anger filled the young man to the brim, spilling out in a stormy torrent. Yamanaka began to shudder, causing her legs to shake, but she managed to cling to the trunk of a nearby oak tree. I ask this your excuse?" Obito couldn't resist grabbing his comrade by the lapels, shouting the last part right in his face. "Obito, please stop!" the girl said unconsciously, but the boy was too far away, and the raging heat engulfing him wouldn't have hurt anything. Destructive emotions were rapidly eroding Ajisai's consciousness, causing a headache in his temples and the back of his head. "Kakashi!" Another deafening cry, right into the eyes of the interlocutor. "Huh? Please stop!" Adzusai began to choke from the uncontrollable flow of terrible feelings. She instinctively tried to cover her ears with her hands, but it was no use. "Say something!" Obito lost control of himself, continuing to shake the silent youth. Hataki's bottomless sadness grew stronger, like a tsunami rolling in with immense force. "No more!" Yamanaka slowly slid down. She wanted to run, to hide from this, but the paralyzed censor could only sit motionless in place. "Obito, stop it!" Kakashi suddenly replied. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "You? Stop! Ha!" Adzusai unconsciously began tearing at the grass at the tree's roots. The sharp wisp scratched her palms, but she didn't notice at all. Her entire being at that moment was focused on someone else's pain and torment, shattering into fragments with each new hesitation. "What right do you have?" Obito's voice cracked in its frenzy, but that didn't stop the indignation. On the contrary, it only fueled it. The fire within him grew, as if consuming the last light within him. Enough! Something hot was leaking from her nose. Adzusai, however, no longer noticed it. She was so lost in the emotions of others that she no longer knew who she was. Unable to bear it, Adzusai closed her eyes, but the sobering relief didn't last longer than a second. Hopelessness returned. "Say that?" The Uchiha's intensity reached its peak. It was a mixture of everything: insane rage, unconsciousness, and gnawing sadness. He vented this suffering with a loud blow that landed squarely on his interlocutor's cheek. "Please!" Adzusai cried silently, covering herself with her palms. The burning tears mingled with the crimson streaks and red cuts from the grass. It felt like something inside was breaking, but too painfully slowly to bring the desired peace of emptiness. "If you don't stop," Kakashi wiped his injured nose with his dark sleeve, "you'll lose her too." The white Fong's son pointed somewhere to the side with his gaze. "What are you doing?" Obito wanted to protest, but heard quiet sobs. A girl was kneeling under the canopy of a mighty oak tree, her hands clutching her face and feverishly brushing lines across it, salty and bloody. Her once tidy hair had come undone and fallen in chaotic clumps onto her shaking shoulders. The Uchiha ran to the injured woman, hoping to somehow help. He couldn't understand why she was in such a state, but he couldn't abandon someone in need. The young man approached and was about to ask what was wrong, when the girl suddenly called his name. "Obito!" was the last thing Yamanaka said before she was immersed in the soft bliss of darkness. She should have fallen to the ground, but the young man reacted and carefully caught her. Those faded lilac eyes, the girl looked at him with. Yamanaka Adzusai, the shinobi from the hospital he should have known, but couldn't quite place. Dry lips, pale skin, and her gaze, so empty and sad. The violet hue reminded him of the hydrangeas the girl had brought to his room. They filled the room with a rich floral scent, and in appearance they resembled a large purple sun. "Wait, why hydrangea? You always take irises." "No, it's because..." "This flower on your hat." What kind of flower was that? Sensors are very sensitive, and Adzusai is super sensitive. Is that why this girl is in this state now? "Everything will be fine now." Is that my voice? The future Hokage must not look around. Who are you? I'm glad, really. Why are you crying? Please remember me, Obito. The young man felt a jolt of electricity. At that very moment, her image pierced him. The forgotten, yet so familiar, image of a sensitive hydrangea girl. "Ah, Adzusai." He began to look at the unconscious Yamanaka with disbelief. Adzusai, what have I done?" Commentary on Scroll 8, Apogee. The work was originally rated PG-13. I often doubted the rating when describing the main character's emotional experiences. But this chapter epitomizes the moral suffering of the entire story. So I thought, and finally decided to simply give it an R rating so I could finish the story without embarrassment. Scroll 9. Without warmth, flowers die. Commentary on Scroll 9. Without warmth, flowers die. This work is created for entertainment purposes only. All rights to the locations, world, and characters of Naruto belong to the original copyright holder. Several months had passed since the incident. During this time, Obito hadn't appeared on Adzusai's radar, not at the hospital, where she had to spend a couple of days, not at the flower shop, not at the training grounds. It was Hatake Kakashi who told her the details of what had happened. The son of the White Fang unexpectedly appeared right at the entrance to the Yamanaka family shop, bringing with him some sweets. Outwardly, he appeared focused and dispassionate as always, but Adzusai sensed that he was somehow consumed by guilt. She didn't dare ask about it, however. She merely politely accepted the gifts and thanked him for everything. "Adzusai, please bring 10 more roses," came from the next room. "Yes, right now, Auntie." The girl was standing in a small nook where hundreds of fragrant buds of various shades, from the usual pinkish and burgundy to unusual herbaceous and amethyst, were stored at low temperatures. Some exuded a strong, spicy aroma, while others had a faint hint of honey. Adzusai had always loved this work, but now she especially appreciated the opportunity to lose herself in the intoxicating bliss of flowers. As usual, after a sharp rise came a decline, Her ninja sensory abilities, which had been enhanced to their maximum, had almost returned to normal. The girl still didn't risk attending noisy events, but otherwise her daily life was little different from usual, except for his absence. "Thank you, my dear." The woman began meticulously examining each flower. No flaws were allowed, as the luxurious floral arrangement had been commissioned for the Uchiha clan leader's celebration. The red and white masterpiece, executed in the esteemed family's signature colors, was almost complete. Just a few cinnabar roses were missing. "It's very beautiful, Auntie." Adzusai stepped back a little to fully appreciate the creation. Chrysanthemums and roses of all varieties and colors, from frayed-edge brick reds to deeper scarlets with perfectly shaped petals, were interspersed with light, almost snow-white asters and playful eustomas, complemented by miniature freesias. The flowers were arranged in a complex gradient. The darkest, almost inky, gave way to brighter ones, then to delicate pastels, until they faded to a soft milky hue, which in turn led to a dazzling white. "That's all for now, so you're free for today." The woman's simple remark concealed far more concern than might have seemed at first glance. The florist wanted to discreetly send her niece away, lest she accidentally run into the person coming to pick up the gift. "Thank you, but I'll stay for now. I'll see if we need to order any more flowers." The girl took the hint and deliberately rejected it. She disappeared through one of the doorways, retreating to a small closet where the documentation was kept. It would have been better for Adzusai herself to leave, to avoid accidentally running into the Uchiha, but something invisible held her back. About an hour after she'd begun studying the dull, monotonous notes, the girl noticed a faint hesitation at the entrance. Without understanding how or why, she rushed to the door to steal a glance at the visitor. Yes, just a glimpse. That would be enough. "Excuse me, I've come to pick up an order for Uchiha," came a male voice. Too low, too hoarse, too alien. Adzusai wanted to go back to her papers, but she didn't notice how her feet carried her away from Yamanaka's shop, and neither the surprised cry of the customer, nor the stunned faces of passers-by, nor the echoing voice of her aunt could stop her. The girl ran out into the next alley, then around the corner, then again and again, repeating the complex sequence countless times. When she couldn't run any longer, Adzusai trudged wearily down yet another street. The people, their faces, their complex or obvious emotions, everything blended into a single, motley stripe, and only occasionally did her gaze rest on dark-haired men. But each time, realizing she'd made a mistake. The girl continued on. She didn't know how long she'd been like that. The sun hadn't set yet, but the tired Yamanaka decided to return anyway. As she turned back toward home, she caught a glimpse of another man with dark locks. His hair stuck up like a perky hedgehog, his charcoal eyes, and the protective glasses he never took off. Without a doubt, it was Obito. Without warmth, flowers die, just as the hydrangea girl, so long separated from the Uchiha's flame, slowly withered. She cut off her long, wheat-colored braids, as caring for them weighed on her, like tending to lifeless buds. So it took Obito some time to recognize the girl as Yamanaka Adzusai. However, even after recognizing her, the young man was in no hurry to move. He stood frozen in front of a small shop window. Awkwardness was the kindest word to describe the tension that had arisen. The Uchiha, who had previously spent hours hanging out in the Yamanaka flower shop, telling Adzusai seemingly everything under the sun, from truly heartbreaking experiences to the most trivial trifles, now looked at his friend like some kind of hermit. He was ashamed, deeply ashamed, even though it wasn't his fault. Adzusai, who had previously always smiled softly and warmly at the sight of the boy, now stood there frozen, unsure what to do. She sensed Obito's depression and his futile attempts to contain his emotions. Hello. Uchiha couldn't think of anything better to do than walk up and say hello. He smiled awkwardly, nervously rubbing his neck, but the scent of fear emanating from him was unmistakable. A musty, lung-crushing, moldy scent of hopelessness. The young shinobi's words required some kind of response, but the words had become tangled into a clumsy tangle that was impossible to untangle. Ajisai merely bowed politely, as distantly as possible, in greeting. "How are you?" Not a sincere desire to know, no, more an attempt to establish some kind of contact after so long. The coldness emanating from Obito, who had once been as warm as fire, was a dead giveaway. Thank you, everything's fine." The girl lowered her head and answered quietly, almost whispering at the end. At that moment, she was struggling with the cursed ability that had decided to flare up at such an inopportune moment, and with the strong desire to escape to her safe haven. I'm glad." The young man didn't have the art of ending a conversation gracefully, so he could only manage a short, "See you later. Take care." Continuing was too frightening. After all, he was considered a coward anyway, so why try to be brave? "Obito!" Ajisai summoned all her willpower, all her love, and every ounce of hope as she called out to the boy who was already leaving. He didn't answer, but his heart somehow froze before pounding loudly inside, and his body felt as if it had been drained of blood. "Obito, There was something abnormal, almost masochistic, about staying put when she so wanted to run away. "I can't anymore." She had already jumped into this hell, so there was no point in stopping. She would say everything, come what may. "How much longer will we avoid each other? How much longer will we pretend we're strangers? I don't want this. Every day I wait for you to come by Iris's for your grandmother, but you never come. Even today. In fact, I was hoping it would be you who would pick up the bouquet for the Uchiha. But even then you weren't there. Obito, I don't blame you, so don't run away anymore." The girl gazed into its dark abyss with her deep lilac eyes, unafraid of drowning and finally letting go of all doubts. Tears, clear as morning dew, trailed in heavy streaks from her light eyelashes. Drops trickled down her chin one after another. Anxiety, a sense of relief, loneliness, joy, dissolving into the earth. "Obito, Yamanaka continued, trying to suppress her sobs. "I love you," the young man interrupted, barely audible. "What?" Adzusai wasn't prepared for the interruption, so she didn't hear what her friend said. "I love you, Adzusai." Obito flushed like a May poppy. Even the tips of his ears were crimson. Overwhelmed by emotion, the shinobi didn't simply express his feelings. He seemed to shout them across Konoha. A scorching hurricane rose from the depths and bathed the censorine in heat. His love was so powerful that it scorched the air around him, almost depriving him of oxygen. Touched and shocked by what was happening, the girl didn't immediately know what to do. But the raging heat within the Uchiha beckoned inexorably. Adzusai moved closer and meekly replied, "Me too." This innocent gesture was enough for the young man to pull her close, to embrace her passionately and kiss her. It was a little clumsy, but no less tender. It was as if a wonderful dream had come true, one he'd been unaware of for most of his life, but once he realized it, he could never let go. Without warmth, flowers perish. Adzusai withered just like that. But now, warmed by the gentle flame, she will blossom with renewed vigor. Commentary on Scroll 9. Without warmth, flowers die. This concludes the main story of Happiness for Obito. It was an interesting experience. Initially, it was a creative experiment. I was curious to see if I, as an author, could write a work that wasn't entirely my own work, but rather something created for someone else. The process was a bit sluggish at first. I didn't fully understand the characters, and some of their actions seemed questionable to me, but then the puzzle gradually came together. I consider Chapter 8, Apogee, to be particularly successful in this regard. It was where the drama and emotion were most concentrated. You can also see Ajisai in my work for the request. Author meets their character. It describes a meeting with every single character from the Naruto universe, so I highly recommend it. https://ficbook.net/readfic/128777186 equals 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 scroll 10. Epilogue equals 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 equals. Commentary on scroll 10. Epilogue. This work is created for entertainment purposes only. All rights to the locations, world, and characters of Naruto belong to the original copyright holder. From the author. The chapters came out not on schedule, but even a little earlier. Smiley face. Peaceful days brought Konoha the calm it sorely needed. The third full-scale shinobi conflict ended with the signing of a series of pacts and treaties designed to restore balance to the 5 Great Villages system. Sarutobi Hiruzen, burdened by the decisions made during the war, stepped down as head of the Leaf Village, making way for the younger Namake's Minato. The Yellow Lightning had become a true legend over the years, having radically influenced the course of the war and saved many precious lives. The names of the ninja who died on the battlefield for this long-awaited future were carved on a giant stone stele. Noera Rin's name was among them. One of the village's many districts. A large 2-story house. The bustling activity within could be heard even from the street. A petite blonde girl, wearing a clover, the Yamanaka family crest, embroidered on her robe, approached the very entrance and knocked delicately. "Hello, Adzasai." She was greeted at the threshold by a beautiful woman with long, strawberry-colored hair, dressed in a festive green velvet dress. Come in," she said, pushing the girl inside, seeing her hesitate slightly. "Good afternoon, Minato-san, Kushina-san." The Hokage, who had settled on the sofa, returned the greeting with a gesture. He held a complex book in his hands, trying his best to concentrate on the text, though with varying success. "Hello, Naruto-kun." "Adzasai." The boy beamed, racing through the halls of the large house. Upon seeing the guest, the blonde tornado rushed straight to her, throwing himself into the arms so lovingly opened especially for him. "Did you bring me a gift?" "Naruto!" His mother hissed at him, criticizing her son's self-interest. Of course. Adzasai released the baby from her arms, rummaged through the bag slung over her shoulder, and pulled out a small package. "Happy birthday, future ninja!" The birthday boy began to impatiently untie the gift, complaining that all these bows and ribbons were completely out of place. "Wow! Thank you!" Childish delight overflowed. "A kunai! A toy kunai! Now I'll be like a real shinobi!" He made a cute face, obviously trying to portray the most menacing expression possible. "Yeah." The girl smiled warmly, glad that her choice was to their liking. The autumn whirlwind swirled around itself, trying to imitate one of his father's training poses. Naruto ran, jumped, and practically squealed with emotion. Adzasai loved such emotional people. It was easy and comfortable to be with them. The young prodigy was so active and cheerful that he reminded the girl of a bright zenith sun, its rays warming everyone. "Kushina-san, where should I put the bouquet?" A tall man emerged from somewhere around the corner. His face was hidden by a mask, only his dark eyes peeking out from beneath his thick silver hair. Only the sensitive Yamanaka could accurately discern the emotions of such a man. "Kakashi, good afternoon." "Hello, Adzasai." Hataki replied with a curt, dry gesture. However, the calm, awe, and tenderness emanating from the shinobi revealed his true state. Uzumaki was bustling about somewhere in the kitchen, occasionally glancing contentedly at the flowers her husband had given her and her beloved son. Adzasai was helping to set the table, occasionally stopping to chat with the radiant little Naruto. The almost familial idol was interrupted by a loud knock, followed by the door opening with an equally loud bang. "I apologize for being late." The young man's apology had become something of a funny tradition. The latecomer was breathing heavily, trying to catch his breath, his hands resting on his overstrained knees, tired from running so fast. His dark hair, always spiky, looked even funnier in this context, and even the crest of the formidable and proud Uchiha clan on his jacket didn't lend any seriousness to the overall appearance. "Obito, you're still the same," Kakashi said to the newcomer, who had been conversing with the fourth about some new technique. Despite his disapproving tone, Hataki was glad to see his partner, and over the years, he'd learned to find something touching in his constant tardiness. Obito Uchiha's big and kind heart could contain concern for everyone in the village, as befitted a future Hokage. Despite the fact that this position was eventually predicted for the White Fang's son, for his outstanding service to the Leaf Village and his remarkable skills, the Uchiha child possessed more suitable moral qualities, for even the Sharingan's curse had spared him. "Well, there's a grandmother with heavy bags," the young man drawled, a little petulantly. He felt a certain injustice in the fact that, over the years, his partner had never stopped teasing him at every opportunity. It would have been fine in their teens, when there was a gigantic gap between their abilities, but now, with a 3-tomo Sharingan and a full arsenal of fire jutsu, Obito was no longer such a weakling. "Ha ha ha!" Adzusai, who had previously been quietly observing her comrades' amusing squabble, burst into a loud, cheerful laugh. Oh, sorry," she said, embarrassed, seeing 5 pairs of surprised eyes staring at her simultaneously. A surprise laced with no judgment, and a hint of delight was palpable in them. But the flame Uchiha instantly emitted a genuine heat. Before Adzusai could ask anything, Obito silently walked up to her, cupped the back of her head with his large hand, and kissed her without hesitation. He pressed his hot lips to hers, lightly nipping at her lower lip, and exhaled blissfully, pulling away. "Bah!" The noisy little boy expressed his sincere disgust at the process. "Naruto!" His mother began to ruffle his hair menacingly, hinting that it was impolite to react so violently. "Kushina!" Minato tried to calm his wife down, so that she wouldn't accidentally rip out a couple of locks of her precious child's hair. "Ha!" It seemed to be the sigh of Hataki, who was accustomed to such scenes. "Oh, Obito, this is—" The girl, flushed to the roots, tried to say something coherent, that now was neither the time nor the place, and that it was too early for little Naruto to see such things. But nothing sensible came to mind. Instead, a scorching hurricane, like the one that had struck the very depths of her soul at the moment of her first confession, swept through her body, searing every inch. Right then, the perceptive ninja sensor ceased to sense the emotions of those around her. It was as if the world had disappeared, and Adzusai could hear only the beating of her own heart, beating in time with the flame-like youth. "Guys, it's time to go to the table." Kushina decided to break the awkward pause, discreetly winking at the still inexperienced Yamanaka. "Birthday toward!" The little imp screamed, not jumping, practically flying onto the chair, which almost fell over from such manipulations. Fortunately, Minato reacted in time, and saved his son from an unenviable encounter with the hard floorboards. The dinner was as cheerful and loud as the preparations. Naruto kept repeating what a great shinobi he would become, then became disgruntled when he was only able to blow out 4 of the 5 candles. Obito, out of old habit, was animatedly arguing with Kakashi, while Kushina embarrassed the hydrangea girl with truly feminine chatter. In short, serenity and happiness finally came to these long-suffering and exhausted people. "Adzusai, and soon you will become an Uchiha?" The woman's indiscreet question nearly made the guest choke on her piece of biscuit. Tension hung in the air, and Adzusai clearly sensed the interest, empathy, and pleasant yearning of everyone gathered. "We're planning a wedding for cherry blossom season," Obito said, rescuing the bride. The young man's benevolence and confidence gave strength to the bewildered girl. "We've made the invitations." Adzusai rummaged through her bag and pulled out several envelopes. "We'll be very glad to see you at the ceremony." Her gentle voice finally trembled at the end. "Minato, look! Purple hydrangeas!" A delicate flower sprig was tied to each invitation. A sweet aroma instantly permeated the room, overpowering even the berry-fruity flavor of the cake. "Adzusai, Adzusai!" Little Naruto, who had already managed to climb down from his comfortable chair and emerge from somewhere under the table, tugged at her blouse sleeve. "Why hydrangeas? Because that's your name?" The girl gently patted the sunny boy, glancing at the excited Kushina the encouraging nod of Minato, and Kakashi, smiling with only his eyes, before settling on his fiancée. Obito was now overflowing with the same love that reigned in the Namikaze Uzumaki couple, strong and faithful, capable of protecting him from any adversity. "It's a very long story, Naruto," the hydrangea girl responded warmly.